discussed on this podcast are determined by the Justice Coordinating Commission of the Sisters of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods, Indiana. Guest opinions do not necessarily reflect those of the Sisters of Providence. To learn more, go to www.spsmw.org.
Welcome to Just Us, where we talk about creating an equitable human community and influencing change. Through shared stories, conversation, and inspiration, we will learn how you can make a difference in your community. I'm your host, Providence Associate Jane Fisher. Today's guests, Meg Olson and Sister Eilish McCullough, join us in this shared space to discuss Equally Sacred. Motivated by their experiences and insights, let's take action for the common good. If not now, tell me when. Meg and Sister, before we begin this topic of the most discussed 2024 Equally Sacred checklist, please tell us about yourselves and how you ended up at Network. And for those in our audience who are not familiar with Network, you can find them online at networkadvocates.org. So, who would like to start?
I can.
Okay, Sister.
Okay, so I have been at Network for almost 4 years now. I started in August of 2020.
Fun time.
Fun time. It was excellent. During the height of COVID, I was in law school at the time and needed an externship, but needed something that was COVID friendly, and reached out to some contacts I had at Network to see if there was anything that I could do at the time. And I've been here in a variety of roles ever since. But I've been familiar with Network for a long time.
Yes, and I had the opportunity to work with you earlier as well. So it was nice to be with you again.
Yes, nice to be with you too.
Great. In August, I will have served at Network for 9 years. Previously to coming to Network, I was working in the advocacy department at Catholic Charities at the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and kind of what we call now our grass tops, or our in the state of Missouri. I was already as a volunteer organizing lobby visits on the Farm Bill and working on Medicaid expansion and letting Network know how that was going in Missouri. And so when the opportunity came up for a grassroots organizer, I took the chance, and I have the fun fact of having moved to Washington, D.C. and starting my job at Network on the 2015 Nuns on the Bus tour.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you were in St. Louis, were you by the arch in the old church? Where was you?
That's where the kickoff rally was. Yes, right under the arch. Yep.
Okay, so we can all picture that.
Yes.
As we get started here, I'd like our listeners to understand a few key voter things. And one thing that we hear often is, how can we check to see if we're registered to vote?
That's a really good question, Jane, because, I think I just moved in the past year from Washington, just half a mile in Washington, D.C., and did not know if I was still registered or if I was still in the same voting area or anything. So I think, there's a lot of ways to do it. There's a lot of organizations out there who want to make sure that we all know our voting status, and if not, register. And Network has that too. So we have a one-stop shop for equipping you to check your registration, register if needed, look at your polling places, all of those things. And that's networkadvocates.org/be-a-voter. That's B-A-voter. And there's going to be a big blue button on that webpage that says check registration. And it should only take a minute or less.
Okay. And B-E is like B-E. B.
Yes. Be a voter. Yes.
Thank you. And here's another thing. that I'm hearing a lot. We talk about, people on the street like me, we talk about issues, but you talk about policies. So can you kind of bring that to me?
Mhm. So one of the things that we often say at Network is something that our former executive director, Sister Simone Campbell, used to say. And it's simply put that policies got us to the point where we are now, got us into this mess, and policies are what will get us out of that mess. And that is looking at the policies in Congress, looking at bills, being familiar of what's being introduced, of what's being passed, of what's not being passed. Because we know that we can elect someone that, elect people who care a lot about the people in the community, or vice versa, do not necessarily care about the people in the community. But if they can not get bills passed in Congress or in your local legislator, then you're not getting the policies across that are helping everyone in your community.
Mhm.
So you can care about the issues, but you need the policies to push the issues forward.
Mhm. That's important.
Mhm.
And we get lots of mail about what's being voted on.
Mhm.
But it
Mhm.
seems to me sometimes that the word issue screams out more than the word policy.
Well, I think about it in terms of like, I don't know, I'm from Ohio or originally. So when I think like issue, something we're voting on, it might be like issue 1, issue 3. But
I see.
policies are much more like bills, legislation
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
Congress, or like the state
Yeah.
Congress.
Mhm.
It's what our elected officials are working on,
Mhm.
and issues are something that we are simply voting on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I would even say like, right, like an issue that I think most of us care about in this country is homelessness and the number of unhoused people we have in this country.
Mhm.
Um, and we would say, but there's lots of ways to cut an issue, which means like, how do you address it? How do you take the huge issue of homelessness and
Mhm.
narrow it down so that we can address it? And there's a lot of ways to address it, right? I mean, there's lots of charity that can happen, and then there's policies that can address it systemically.
Yes.
And people might have, right, you might have two candidates who say that they care deeply about homelessness, but they're going to have different policy solutions. And then
Mm.
it's up to us to like evaluate that and maybe like look to some people who might know a little bit more, like
Uh-huh.
our colleague Jarrett here at Network works on housing at the federal
Mhm.
level. And we can say, hey, which one is better? Which one is going to serve more people? Which
Yeah.
one is going to be more effective?
Mhm.
Which one isn't going to, or some people might say, well, which one isn't going to like cost more in the budget, right? Like we're coming at it from different angles, but the
Yes.
policies are
Yes.
what's going to happen to address the
Yeah.
problem.
And it's like
And
issues are the umbrella, and the
Mhm.
policies are everything that's under that addresses the issue.
Okay. And when you say serve more people, you're talking really about voting for the common good. What does Pope Francis say about that? He talks about the common good.
Yeah, so voting for the common good, I mean, it's certainly right in the Catholic social tradition, it is our responsibility to care for the common good and participate in ways that serve the common good. And in our nation at this moment, as you know, the question you're asking, the most effective way to do that is vote for the common good. And what does that mean? It means that we're considering the most marginalized people and communities and prioritizing their needs when we cast our ballots. And ultimately, what that means is that voting is an act of solidarity, right? By voting for the candidates who have the best solutions, policy solutions to these issues that we're concerned about, whether it's homelessness, whether it's climate change, whether it's, just the crazy cost these days for healthcare, for prescription drugs. So when we're considering all these things, we are voting in solidarity with the most marginalized. But guess what? When we vote with that consideration of the needs of the unhoused, the needs of seniors who have to choose every month between their prescriptions and like their utilities, the cost of air conditioning this summer, right? We're 98 degrees today here in DC. When you're considering the needs of the DACA recipient who feels uncertain about her future, when you're considering all of these, you are also actually voting for a future where everyone and all communities thrive. And that is really right, that everyone is thriving, no exceptions. And if we, listen to the bottom up, those policies, the policies that are created to serve the most marginalized person benefit all of us. And so that's what it means to vote for the common good.
I think that's also very connected to Equally Sacred and how Pope Francis talks about Equally Sacred, that all issues are equally sacred to one another, that the needs of those who are poor or who are marginalized are equally important to all other issues, that we can't pick and choose one over the other.
Could we take a moment here then and talk about freedoms? And how does equally sacred come into freedoms?
Sure. Well, so this is the third year that Network has really embraced Pope Francis's framing of issues being equally sacred, that we cannot prioritize one above the other. And this year, instead of saying like, okay, equally sacred is the climate and equally sacred is healthcare, we really thought it was important to connect this to like, what are the needs of the people? How do we show that everyone having access to healthcare, or everyone having access, or everyone, if immigrants coming to this country are treated fairly, that they're welcomed, the immigrants who have been here for a long time have a clear pathway to citizenship, like all those things. How do they relate to our democracy? Because right at the end of the day, this election is about protecting and preserving our democracy so that we can expand it and improve upon it in the coming years. But so how can we connect all these issues to this concept of a healthy democracy? And we really, we knew that it was about this, like, that we have the freedom to be healthy, or we have the freedom to care for oneself and one's family. And Jane, some of us are not comfortable with that word freedom, right? It's been co-opted in a lot of different ways, and has a lot of connotations that might make us uncomfortable. And that goes for us here at Network. I'm sure that goes for some of our listeners. And I just want, it's important for us as people of faith to claim, or really reclaim, the word freedom, and to acknowledge that all of us, as people made in the image of God, have freedoms that are rightly ours. And so we must claim that freedom is for everyone, not just a select few. It doesn't matter, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, gender, income, education, faith, tradition, we can go on and on. Everyone has the right to all of these freedoms, and it's important for us to frame our ideas in the language of freedom. And this comes out of a book called The Persuaders by Anandya Das. That this idea that when we frame our ideas in this language of freedom, when we claim freedom, it shows that we are participating in this debate about what freedom is and who guards it. And so this election year, we need to protect the freedoms that are essential to all of us for a multiracial, multi-faith democracy to flourish. And so each of the 6 freedoms listed on our equally sacred checklist are things that everyone deserves, no exceptions.
So framing it that way, and the membership in our community of Sisters of Providence and the associates, we're all different ages throughout the spectrum. What would you say is the freedom to be healthy?
So I think, when we talk about the freedom to be healthy, we're talking about that we value and we envision a country, a world where everyone has access to good healthcare, to nutrition, and that healthcare and nutrition is treated as a fundamental human right available to all people, regardless of their wealth. So we're talking about things like making sure that we can protect and expand healthcare for all people, and also end the injustice of medical debt, which is skyrocketing.
Yes, yes.
We're talking about making sure that we are able to reduce the cost of prescription drugs, like Meg said, so people are not choosing between the medicine that they need to essentially to stay alive. We want to make sure that we're reducing the cost of prescription drugs.
Mhm.
We're working towards ending the Black maternal health crisis. And kind of the huge one, our 4th goal under this is ending hunger. And we're talking about school lunch programs for children, making sure that children have enough food to live, that healthy food options are available in each community. We've long worked on issues around SNAP and WIC, and making sure
Yes.
that parents have access to those life-saving programs to ensure that their children and their family members are healthy.
And addressing these as freedoms to be healthy gives us a different perspective,
Right.
a totally different perspective.
It does.
Yeah, it invites this sense, well, yes, I have a freedom to be healthy. My neighbor does, the child across the street, down the street
Mhm.
does, the town over, we can keep thinking about, right? We, the
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
all of us have the freedom to be
Mhm.
healthy. So.
Yes. Well, here's another one. The freedom to live on a healthy planet.
So yeah, so I think this is where this intersection of like issue and policy, right? Because the issue is
Yes.
environment, or the issue is the climate or climate justice. But Pope Francis writes in his latest apostolic exhortation, Laudate Deum, it is necessary to be honest and recognize that the most effective solutions will not come from individual efforts alone. And now these individual efforts are really important. And we know that so many people are addressing the issue of climate change in their personal life by deciding, I'm going to stop using single-use plastic, or I am going to bike more and not rely on my car, or I am going to plant a community garden. And those things are all important. But Pope Francis reminds us here, right? We have to be honest. This is not going to address the climate crisis, these personal decisions. But above all, this is going to be addressed by major political decisions. So these policies on the national and international level. So he's talking about both our own nation, in the US context, our own Congress, our own administration, and then how do they interact with the UN and other major decision-making bodies when they show up at like the Paris Convention or different things like that, right? So if we are going to advance the freedom to live on a healthy planet for all of us, whether we live in Flint, Michigan, or the hollers of Eastern Tennessee, or along the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon, or in the on the south side of Chicago, we need policies. And some of the policies that we know we need to call Congress to enact, that lawmakers, they need to end tax subsidies for fossil fuel companies, right? Fossil fuel companies make up for the majority of why we're in this climate crisis, right? both through the extraction, but then also what is being produced by fossil fuels in our atmosphere and polluting our air and our water. And speaking of water, and another thing that Congress can do at a very local level, right? This has very local personal consequences, is enact the FLOW Act. And that stands for Financing Lead Out of Water. So this means that any child in Flint, in Chicago, in northern Minnesota, wherever, can turn on their tap and fill a glass and drink it. And isn't that an incredible freedom that we all deserve? The freedom to drink our water. which is right, this very personal version of the freedom to live on a healthy planet.
That's right. What can we expect these our public elected officials to do to give us freedom to care for ourselves and our families?
I think this is one of the freedoms that people can really latch onto, because it is so, not just practical, but it affects everyday life for so many people, and they see it. Because this is one that is around economic justice, and that we know that economic justice is a right for all people, and not just for those who already live in prosperity. So we're talking about ensuring that there are guaranteed paid leave and childcare support for families, because childcare is one of the largest costs. I know so many people that are choosing between working and putting most of their salary into childcare or staying home. And that shouldn't be something that people need to choose between. Childcare should be affordable. We're working to make sure that everyone has a living wage, and that we're protecting workers' rights. Meg often talks about, just here 2 months ago now, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, where
in Baltimore,
where the ship crashed into, and the people who died were migrant workers, and who did not have the same protections, the same rights as so many workers. So we're making sure that all workers, no matter if they're working in factories, if they're migrant farm workers, no matter who they are, that they have access to worker protection. We're working to make sure that housing is affordable, as Meg talked about in the beginning of this. Making sure that all families have the freedom to purchase and live in their own home. Investing in free education, like community college programs or HBCUs or different programs like that. And that this also is connected to the wealth and income inequality in our country that has soared over the last 40 years, because we know that the wealthiest 1% in the United States own 1/3 of the nation's wealth, which is unfathomable to me. And so we want to make sure in this freedom to care for oneself and one's family that the wealthy are paying their fair share to promote the common good. And that we are working to expand tax credits for working families and individuals.
So the policy would be our beloved child tax credit that Network has worked tirelessly on, and so many of our members and advocates that has been so much of the focus of the work over the past few years for all of you.
And we've heard, just last week I was on a webinar and listening to families who have accessed the child tax credit and the difference it made, that they were able to make sure their kids had everything that they needed for school. It was to pay rent, pay utilities, make sure one person just talked about it felt so good to make sure that my kids had new clothes to go to school in the first day. And it was something that they could never do before.
And that all rolled down into the local economy too.
Exactly.
Help those stores and employers and It really was amazing. So,
Mhm.
well, what a meeting. Policies and freedoms, a new perspective, and looking at the common good, families and people of all ages, and what impacts us locally and as a nation, and then, as you said, other countries as well, to look at policies and what is this sacred part of voting.
Mhm.
Well, we get always to the end of our calls and we ask for a call of action, a call to action. So what can I do? What can we do? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think first, with our equally sacred checklist, share it. Make sure you're sharing it with your friends, your family, congregations, in local parishes and local community organizations, because the equally sacred checklist is a great way to evaluate candidates, really think through the issues that are important for the common good. You can also use that equally sacred checklist at town halls to help you formulate questions, which I think is a great resource, and puts a different spin on questions
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
roots it in Catholic social justice and in the freedom language. In terms of getting involved this election year, we encourage you to connect with Network and see what we're doing. Maybe you are able to be a poll worker, or in some states, there's also poll chaplains. It's really dependent on where you live. But think about the ways that you can actively get involved.
Mhm.
I know in my congregation at our mother house, there's some sisters who are going to be hosting a ballot research party, which is one of the suggestions we have at Network. So they're going to research the entire ballot from top to bottom,
Wow.
and then have a fun party with food and snacks and
Uh-huh.
drinks and decorations. I'm sure they're going to go all out
Oh,
for
I'm
this.
sure.
And they're going to really do an education, especially on the issues.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
and it's important, like the judges, the local elected officials who you don't hear much about. So often people are going into the voting booth, they're voting by mail, and they're just guessing or selecting based on a name maybe,
Mhm.
because they don't know what really is happening or who that person is. So that's something fun that groups can do.
And I think it's so important. I grew up in Chicago, and I remember walking in to an election and seeing 14 judges, and I was supposed to vote for 3. And I was just like, whoa,
What?
this is crazy.
Yeah.
I'll confess I voted for women because I just figured that would at least put more women in the
No.
courts making decisions. But I was also like 24. But when we think about those local elections like that, we hear like, oh, it was like won by like less than 100 votes. And so if we
Mhm.
have like people who are educated, who are not leaving sections of their ballot blank, who come in with confidence about, okay, these are the the dog catcher, or the water reclamation people who are going to be looking at things, they're right. There are choices that have to be made at each level on the ballot, up and down the ballot, and it's our responsibility as people of faith to be informed. So
It is. And I can't thank you enough, because when I personally think of things now, I might know how someone stands on the issue. But if I look a bit further, I'll see where they are on the policy. Did they
yeah.
carry forward with that?
Yeah. And one last tool that we're going to have on our website, and we're going to have a lot of resources at that Be a Voter page, but something, voting has gotten really complicated, in this post-COVID reality in different ways. And if you've moved or whatever, so we're going to have a make your voting plan, and people can commit to you, and you can help people fill this out, especially if they're new to the area, or who
Yes.
knows, like, are you going to vote by mail? Are you going to vote absentee? Are you going to vote early? Or are you going to show up on election day? You have a lot of choices. Do you know where your polling place is, right? So this is literally like a worksheet where people are going to create their plan, because we know if you don't have a plan, you're not going to show up. And if you know exactly what you're doing and how many stamps, if you are going to vote by mail, I need 2 stamps to put on that ballot. In Ohio, in DC, we don't, our postage is paid for if we vote by mail. So, right, like all of these local differences, so people are prepared, they're going to vote. If they get to November 5th and they're like, oh my God, I don't even know where my ballot, where my polling place is. And, after like my Congress member, I don't even know who's running, and they're all stressed out. Like, they're not going to vote. They're not going to go vote. And they're just throwing away their democracy.
And the story that I keep telling is, I think it doesn't matter if you are a first-time voter or you've voted in every single election since the time you were eligible to vote, but to check, like to double check, not just your registration, but double check your polling location. Because last year in Ohio, in a state that had recently been gerrymandered and the districts all changed, I showed up to vote at my polling location on election day, and I was at the wrong location because it had changed a week earlier. And I wasn't aware of it. So even like a real quick check the night before you go vote. And often you can check on our website, but like the Secretary of State website for your state will have polling locations on it. And just make sure you know where you're going.
Yeah.
When you're voting.
Yeah. And as more and more states are enacting, state voter ID laws, which we know are there to restrict access to the voting poll, like just making sure what do you need when you walk in? You used to be able to say, here's, just give them your name and you'd get to go walk to the voting booth. And that's not true in most of our states anymore. So all of those things that you need to check. And so, like we said, we made this worksheet so that you can fill it out, Jane, but then like have 5 of your friends, make sure that they have their plan, right?
Yes, yes. So we can go to your site to be a voter.
Yes.
That was your link. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you. And thank you, Just Us listeners, for sharing this time and space with us today. We hope you are inspired and have learned from both Meg and Sister Eilish from Network Advocates, and that you are ready to join us in the calls to action. Are you ready now to begin to make a difference in conversations within your community? If not now, tell me when. And let's close with a prayer. This is one from one of our Providence associates, Lori Strong. God, who makes all choice possible, hear my prayer for justice and for mercy. Help us vote for the person most likely to do what is right, who will not be swayed by power or profit. Help us remember the needs of the many, not merely our own. Thank you for the blessing of this opportunity, the chance to be heard. Let us not misuse it. Guide us, O God. Amen. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and will share it with others. Please leave your comments, reviews, and any suggested topics at spsmw.org/contact. Until next time.